I was the legally registered husband of a powerful billionaire CEO, yet after being unconscious for 2 hours, I woke up to find myself labeled as the invisible X on social media. My own son, whom I had raised with my own hands, was caught on camera sweetly calling another man dad, while they shared a same spoonful of ice cream. The post was captioned, "The Miller family's heartwarming outing," and the entire internet was swooning over their high society romance. After years of marriage, I thought I was building a home, but in their eyes, I was just an on-call nanny and a human ATM. Everything changed when I finally walked away, moved to a quiet town to garden, and adopted my long-lost nephew, who was as fragile as a stray kitten. I finally came to after lying unconscious on the floor of my apartment for over 2 hours and immediately called Olivia. Before I could even get a word out, her crisp, decisive voice cut through the phone, telling me it was just tabloid garbage and that she would explain everything when she got home. I stared blankly at the dead phone in my hand, taking a few minutes for my brain to process that I should check the news. I did not have to look far, because she was already trending on Twitter. Olivia Miller, the CEO of Miller Enterprises, had finally revealed her family in a sweet public outing. The accompanying photo showed Olivia with one arm wrapped around our son, Ian, and the other slung casually over the shoulder of a handsome man. A bitter laugh escaped my lips as I realized the world now saw them as a perfect family. If he was the elusive Mr. Miller, then what did that make me? Her legal husband? The phone slipped from my grasp and clattered to the floor as I pushed myself up from the cold hardwood, only for a wave of intense dizziness to wash over me. I scooped up my phone and glanced at the time, shocked that I had really been unconscious for more than 2 hours. I figured it was low blood sugar, which had happened once before when I skipped a meal. I stumbled out of the study in search of something to eat, but a soft crackle sounded from under my foot. I looked down to see that the intricate model airplane I had spent half the day assembling was now a crushed mess of plastic. I did not have the heart to care and simply kept walking toward the kitchen. After eating a caramel and a piece of toast, I finally started to feel like a human being again. I collapsed on the sofa and stared into space for a good 15 minutes before picking up my phone again. I opened the trending article and found a video, hitting play without a second thought. Through the shaky lens of a paparazzo, I watched a montage of the Miller Enterprises CEO and her family enjoying a day at an amusement park. They rode the Ferris wheel together, watched a circus performance, and played frisbee on the lawn. The comments were full of gushing praise about how down-to-earth Olivia Miller appeared to be. Even though the footage was grainy, I instantly recognized the man being mistaken for her husband as Julian Thorne, Olivia's first love and the ghost she had been chasing for years. The video continued as Julian dug a spoonful of his own ice cream and held it to Ian's mouth, and my son ate it without a second thought. My breath caught in my throat when Julian leaned in and kissed Ian on the cheek. Ian, my son who never once let me kiss him, smiled and kissed him right back. A sharp, stabbing pain lanced through my chest, so intense that it made me double over as tears streamed down my face. Suddenly, all my years of trying and holding on felt like a pathetic joke. When Ian was a baby, I could not stop kissing his chubby cheeks, but sometime after he turned 2, he put a stop to it. If I tried to show him affection, he would shove me away with all his might and then meticulously wipe the spot with a tissue. I asked him once why he would not let his daddy kiss him. He replied that my spit had germs, his little voice full of solemn conviction. He would never eat anything I had already taken a bite of, either. If I offered him a piece of fruit I was eating, he would push my hand away with his brow furrowed in disgust, claiming it was dirty. Back then, the sight of his round little face pursed in a serious pout made me think he was paradoxically adorable. While his rejection stung a little, I had to admit he had a point about hygiene. I even felt a swell of pride, thinking my kid was so smart and disciplined for being so conscious of cleanliness at such a young age. He was his mother's son through and through, as that serious expression was a perfect copy of hers. I loved his mother so much that it was impossible not to love him, so I respected his wishes and stopped trying to kiss him. I stopped offering him food from my plate, and after he turned 3, I rarely even picked him up at his insistence. I always thought it was just his personality, believing he was born with a certain cool reserve and a natural distance from the world. I understood it, and I respected it. But watching that video today made me realize that his so-called reserve was reserved only for me. Olivia, a woman who rarely smiled, was apparently capable of a radiant expression when she was with him. My son, whom I thought was a budding germaphobe, was perfectly fine eating from someone else's spoon and trading kisses on the cheek. In all these years, despite all my efforts, I had never received the kind of affection they both gave so freely to Julian Thorne. I had to admit that as both a husband and a father, I was a complete failure. In that instant, it felt like all the energy and drive I had ever possessed was being vacuumed out of me. A wave of exhaustion, unlike anything I had ever felt, crashed over me, pulling me under as I stared numbly at the ceiling. I decided to just give up because one person can only try for so long. I did not have the strength anymore, and I realized that reaching Olivia was simply too hard, so I did not want to do this anymore. After another long moment of staring into nothing, it suddenly occurred to me that I should go to the hospital. I had been feeling tired all the time lately, and after actually passing out today, I could no longer ignore my health. I had been meaning to get a full checkup for a while, but I was always too busy with household chores and taking care of my family. I had worked myself to the point of collapse, fainting alone in my apartment for hours without anyone noticing, all for the sake of my wife and son. Meanwhile, the two of them were out having the time of their lives with someone else. The thought was incredibly bleak, and for the first time, I felt like I deserved better, so I resolved to be good to myself from now on. I was done being the selfless fool who took care of everyone but himself, so I went to Mount Sinai in New York. I paid a premium for the executive VIP service and received a comprehensive physical. The doctor told me the results would be ready in 2 hours, and while I was waiting in the private lounge, I received an iMessage friend request. I tapped the profile picture to see Julian Thorne's breezy, confident face, and I accepted the request. A few minutes later, he sent a voice memo, and when I pressed play, the conversation chilled me to the bone. Julian's voice asked Ian if he was worried about his dad getting mad that he had come to spend the day for Julian's birthday. "Don't worry, Uncle Julian. He doesn't know," my son Ian replied, his 4-year-old voice still soft and childlike. Julian then asked why I didn't want to hang out with him on a Saturday. Ian explained that he told me to build his Lego set, so I wouldn't have time to go out, and Julian asked if he had done that specifically to spend time with him. Ian admitted he lied and told me it was school homework because the Lego set was so hard it would take me all day. Julian praised him for being so smart and said he was touched by the effort. I then heard a familiar smack, which was likely another kiss, and even though I was used to disappointment, hearing that conversation wounded me all over again. I wondered how a voice still so full of childish innocence could be so cold and calculating. I thought back to that morning when I had gone to the Miller estate to pick Ian up for the weekend, my heart full of anticipation. Instead of a hug, he shoved a huge box into my arms and claimed his teacher assigned it as homework because it was too hard for him. Ian rarely showed any weakness in front of me, so I had interpreted his claim that it was too hard as a plea for help and a form of affection. Despite my disappointment that we would not have time to go out and play, I felt a startling sense of satisfaction at being needed by him. Olivia had stood beside him with her usual flat expression as she watched the interaction. Olivia told me that I could help Ian with his Legos at home while she took him to the office with her. I wanted to say that I could build the Legos and watch him at the same time, but after years of instinctively deferring to her, the words would not come. I just silently watched as they left the house together. Now I knew it was all a lie, and that my son had used my love for him to trap me at home with a Lego set as a pretense. My wife had taken our son to see the man she had always loved instead of going to work. In this family, I had always been an outsider, and the moment I truly accepted that fact, a sense of clarity washed over me. Thankfully, the doctor's results came back and put my fears to rest, confirming there was nothing seriously wrong with me. I was simply suffering from chronic exhaustion, and I had fainted today, because skipping lunch triggered a hypoglycemic episode. The doctor advised me to get proper rest, eat well, and make sure I was getting enough nutrition. I nodded repeatedly, resolving that I would never make a stupid mistake like forgetting to eat because I was busy with a Lego set again. From now on, nothing was more important than my own health. On the way home from the hospital, another message from Julian popped up, a text this time, telling me to get lost because I knew who Olivia really loved. I let out a small, dry laugh, wondering if Olivia knew her Prince Charming was capable of speaking so crudely. It seemed Julian was serious about winning her over this time. I wondered if it was because he finally realized how good she was to him after his own marriage failed, or if he had actually fallen in love with her. After all, back in the day, Julian had been able to walk away and move abroad without a backward glance, even as Olivia begged him to stay. On the day he got married overseas, Olivia flew across the world in a last-ditch effort to stop the wedding. He had rejected her then without even batting an eye. For him, Olivia had never been the first choice, unless of course circumstances had changed, and she was now his best option. It was Olivia's unwavering love that gave him this audacity. It was true that since he had returned to the States over a month ago, she had been coming home later and less frequently. Her heart had already started to wander, or perhaps it had always been with him, which was why Julian could provoke me so blatantly. I did not reply to his message because I was far too tired. I did not want to waste a single ounce of energy on him right now. I just wanted to end this mistaken marriage and leave. Almost home, I stopped at a quiet bistro, ordered a few dishes, and ate slowly and deliberately. I was determined to follow the doctor's orders and eat well from now on. It was after 7 when I got back to the apartment, and I was lying on the sofa watching TV as the sky darkened outside. I was about to get up for a shower when I heard a sound at the front door. Olivia walked in holding Ian's hand, rubbing her temples as she told me to make some coffee because her head was killing her from drinking. I looked up at the stunning, aloof woman before me. She was wearing a casual light blue tracksuit, which was a rare sight that gave her an unusually soft look. Ever since I became her assistant after graduation, I had only ever seen her in impeccably tailored, severe business suits. Her unsmiling expression, paired with expensive formal wear, created an intimidating distance between us. Even after we were married, the only other thing I ever saw her in was her pajamas after a nightly shower. I rarely saw her in casual clothes, or rather, outside of work and sleep, I almost never saw her at all. It struck me then that in all our years of marriage, she had never once taken me out anywhere for fun or for any other reason. This marriage and this relationship were truly a failure. Noticing that I had not moved from the sofa, Olivia's brow tightened as she told me to hurry up. Before today, that impatient look would have sent a jolt of anxiety through me, but now I felt remarkably calm. I replied evenly that there was no coffee in the house. Olivia, who had just sat down, froze for a moment as if she had not expected me to refuse her. She sat up straight and stared at me, asking if I was angry about what happened today. I started to answer, but I was cut off by Ian, who had run straight to the study when they arrived and was now running back out. "Why didn't you finish my Lego plane?" he demanded, holding a broken plastic wing and glaring at me. I looked at him calmly and asked if his teacher had actually assigned that for homework. Ian's lips tightened, and his tone was unapologetic as he said he just really wanted the finished plane. "So you lied to me," I said, my voice steady and not at all angry. I told him he lied to get me to build his Lego set, so he could spend the day with Julian without me bothering him. Ian accused me of always clinging to him every weekend and said it was no fun being with me, which brought a sad smile to my lips. I asked him if it was really because I was no fun or if he simply did not like me. Ian bit his lip and said nothing, even though he was my own flesh and blood. His eyes and brows held a shadow of my own features, and I remembered how I used to stare at him and grin like an idiot for the first 6 months of his life. I used to poke his little cheeks and wonder how my baby could be so cute and how I could not love him. However, this son of mine was incredibly hard to please. Perhaps it was because as soon as he was weaned, he was sent to live with his grandparents at their estate, so he was never close to me. Every weekend when I brought him home, I would try everything I could think of to make him happy, but he was never interested. I would suggest a trip to the zoo, but he would refuse, and he would refuse whenever I offered to play games at home. Faced with this impenetrable little boy, I was often at a loss. Our most common way of spending time together was in silence. I would prepare his snacks and meals while he stayed in the study watching cartoons, reading books, or playing with blocks. He was very self-disciplined for his age, allowing himself exactly 15 minutes of screen time and never a minute more. He was already learning to read and count on his own because his grandparents had hired tutors for every subject, creating a perfectly structured schedule for him. He did not need my guidance for anything. Sometimes I would see him working on math problems and offer to help, but without looking up, he would reply that he did not need me because his tutor would teach him. Now I finally understood that because he did not like me as his father, he did not want to be with me or have any interaction at all. For the first time, I realized that maybe we were just fated to have a weak bond that could not be forced. It was the first time I had ever spoken to Ian in a tone that was not trying to please him. He seemed stunned, just staring up at me blankly until Olivia pulled our son behind her. Her expression was disapproving as she admonished me, asking if I was taking my anger about them out on a 4-year-old. I told her I was not taking anything out on him and was simply stating a fact. Sensing that my attitude was different from usual, Olivia sighed and repeated that I did not need to worry about the news. I nodded and flatly told her to explain herself since I was listening. She explained that she and Julian had grown up together and that he had just moved back to the States after getting a divorce. She claimed she was worried he was depressed as a friend and might do something stupid, so she had been spending more time with him. She asked if I thought that was crossing a line, especially since it was his birthday and they only went to an amusement park. I asked her how she intended to handle the news story that was trending. Since we got married, I have never appeared in front of the media, so the public has no idea what Mr. Miller actually looks like. Her plan was to just let the story die down and pay to have the trending topic removed. She believed that if they pushed some other entertainment news, everyone would move on because the internet has a short memory. I had always known Olivia did not love me, and for years, I had been fueled by a desperate hope that I could melt her icy heart. I never imagined I was this insignificant in her eyes, though. Her husband and son were trending online with another man as a family of 3, and in her view, I was not even entitled to an opinion. In fact, I was expected to play along and let the world believe Julian Thorne was her husband. For her, condescending to explain this much was likely her way of showing me respect, and any further complaint would be seen as childish. I was done being the docile, understanding husband, and today I did not feel like being mature, so I asked if she wanted to hear a better solution. I tilted my head and offered a small smile as I proposed that we get a divorce. I suggested she immediately marry Julian, so their status as a couple would be official. That way, the public would never know she was on her second marriage, and they could be a real family of 3 and appear in the media together without any issues. I looked at her with a deadly serious tone and asked if she didn't think that was a much better solution than hers. Olivia's face instantly turned to ice, and she told me there was a limit to these tantrums because I knew she lacked patience. I replied that I was not throwing a tantrum and that the divorce proposal was completely serious. Olivia was about to speak, but Ian suddenly shouted that he was fine with a divorce, so Julian could be his new dad. He bragged that Julian graduated from an Ivy League school and knew everything about science and history. Ian claimed that Julian could help him with his homework and was the one who actually deserved to be his father. I thought to myself that I had graduated from a top university too, but he never even gave me the time of day to find out if I could help him. It did not matter anymore since I had already decided to leave, so there was no point in explaining. I just smiled and agreed that Julian was a better fit to be his father, wishing them a wonderful life together. Lucas Sterling, Olivia said, her face a dark cloud as she warned me that if I kept this up, there would be no way to walk it back. I looked at the woman I had loved for so many years and started to doubt if I ever really knew her at all. It seemed that whenever Julian Thorne was involved, all of her principles and reason simply flew out the window. Olivia Miller, I shot back, using her full name for the first time. I told her she had a team of top lawyers and that I would leave the divorce agreement to her. I pointed out that a divorce was the most advantageous option for her right now, since it solved the media problem and granted her desire to marry her one true love. I asked her if it wasn't a perfect win-win situation for everyone involved. Olivia stood up and told me she understood I was angry and not thinking clearly, suggesting we talk again when I calmed down. She took Ian's hand and left. And as for the trending news, the topic quietly vanished from Twitter just as she had promised. The buzz around the Miller family outing died down quickly, and throughout the entire episode, the official Miller Enterprises social media accounts remained silent. All parties involved said nothing, but everyone knows that silence is a form of confirmation. In effect, Miller Enterprises had tacitly approved the narrative that they were a family of three. I felt nothing about it anymore, and simply waited quietly for Olivia's divorce papers. 3 days passed with no word from her, and whenever I called her office, her assistant would tell me in a detached tone that she was unavailable. I asked when she would be free, but the assistant claimed she was not sure. On the 4th day, still unable to reach her, I sent her a direct text message stating that if I didn't see a divorce agreement by tomorrow, I would hold a press conference as the real Mr. Miller. Her call came almost immediately after that. She came home from work that evening, but she did not bring any of the legal papers I had requested. She seemed convinced that I was just throwing a prolonged fit, telling me to stop making a scene because the whole thing was over. I told her I honestly did not understand why she wouldn't just divorce me and marry Julian if she was so in love with him. She asked me what people in our circle would say about him if she divorced me the moment he returned to the country. The realization finally dawned on me that she did not want him to have a reputation as a homewrecker. Before she could answer, I told her that his reputation was not my problem and that all I wanted was a divorce. I insisted that his reputation had nothing to do with me, but Olivia snapped that there was a limit to my petulance. She warned me that if she actually agreed to the divorce, there would be no turning back for me. I told her one more time that I was not throwing a tantrum. I threatened that if I did not see a divorce agreement by 9 o'clock tonight, I would create accounts on every social media platform to announce that I was the legal Mr. Miller and that Julian Thorne was an interloper. Olivia snapped in a fury that she would call her lawyer right then and have the papers delivered immediately. She warned me not to regret my decision, but I simply urged her to hurry. She added that Ian was a Miller and I would not be getting custody of him. I gave a self-deprecating shrug and told her he didn't like me anyway, so he wouldn't come with me even if I wanted him. A little over 2 hours later, a lawyer arrived with the agreement. I glanced over the papers and saw that Olivia would have custody of Ian while I would have visitation rights. To my surprise, she was being quite generous with the settlement. When we got married, her parents had insisted on a prenuptial agreement, keeping the Miller fortune separate from my assets, so I had been fully prepared to walk away with nothing. However, Olivia had allocated a significant amount of assets to me, which amounted to a small fortune. I did not hesitate to pick up a pen and sign my name. She had also generously given me the apartment we lived in, so after signing, I told her we would go to the courthouse to file tomorrow and that she could leave now. As I closed the door, Olivia stood there with her face set like stone, telling me she would not indulge my tantrum forever. She warned me that I would have to pay the price for this little stunt. Even now, she was convinced I was just acting out, still threatening me and telling me there was no turning back. She did not know that the moment I decided on a divorce, I had no intention of ever looking back. The next day, we filed the papers at the courthouse, starting the mandatory 1-month cooling-off period. During that month, Olivia and I did not see each other once, though I still went to pick up Ian on the weekends as usual. Ian asked if I was really divorcing his mom, and when I nodded, his face lit up with undisguised joy. I no longer felt the sting of his dislike. In a tone that sounded like he was granting me a great favor, my son told me I could visit in the future, but that once a month would be enough. He said he did not want to make Uncle Julian unhappy, but I did not respond. I had done my best with the child and had finally made peace with the fact that he did not love me. A month later, I met Olivia at the courthouse, and after we received the final divorce decree, I walked away without a backward glance. I spent the next month quickly liquidating the assets Olivia had signed over to me, selling the apartment and the retail space. I sold everything, including the home we had lived in for 5 years. The night before I was set to leave, I called the estate to tell Ian I would stop by the next day to see him one last time. After all, I was leaving, and it might be a long time before we saw each other again. Ian's voice was impatient as he told me he was busy because Uncle Julian was taking him swimming tomorrow. I simply said goodbye and told him to grow up, well, before hanging up and boarding a train heading south the next day. My hometown was a small village in Vermont, and the house I grew up in with its little yard was still there. It had been sitting empty and neglected ever since my parents passed away. I hired a crew and had the entire house renovated inside and out. My plan was to plant a flower garden in the front yard and start a vegetable patch in the back. As the renovations began, I started a new Instagram account to document the process. My goal was to become a lifestyle blogger, chronicling my quiet rural life of planting flowers, tending to vegetables, and cooking my meals. This was the life I had always dreamed of, but while I was chasing after Olivia, it had been an impossible dream that I had to bury deep inside. Now, busying myself in my own little yard, my heart felt lighter and more at peace than ever before. I started the blog just to see what would happen, having no real expectations for it. To my surprise, the video I posted documenting the complete renovation got over 1 million views and more than 100,000 likes. In just 3 short months, my account had tens of thousands of followers. It was a completely unexpected and welcome surprise as the weather slowly turned cold. Most of the plants in the front yard shed their leaves, leaving behind bare branches. One day, I was walking through the yard thinking about what kind of evergreens I could plant to bring more life to the space when my phone rang. It was the police telling me they had found my nephew. The moment I saw the little boy at the police station, I knew it was true that he was my nephew. He looked so much like my sister and, at the same time, so much like me. The police had my sister and brother-in-law's DNA on file, and they confirmed the match, proving he was without a doubt their son. I pulled the little boy into a tight hug, noticing how thin and small he was. Even though he was a year older than Ian, he looked much shorter and felt as light as a feather in my arms, like a tiny, fragile kitten. "Toby," I whispered, burying my face in the crook of his neck as tears streamed down my face, telling him that I was his Uncle Lucas. Years ago, my mother had been walking down the street, holding Toby in her arms when a van suddenly pulled up beside them. A man jumped out, snatched the child from her arms, and leaped back into the vehicle before speeding away. Toby was gone in an instant, and my sister and brother-in-law quit their jobs to begin a desperate nationwide search. They followed every tip and lead, no matter how remote it seemed. One time, someone shared a photo of a boy who looked like Toby, and they were driving through a torrential storm to get there when their car crashed. Both of them were killed in the accident. My mother, consumed by guilt ever since Toby was taken, went into a rapid decline and was soon bedridden. At that time, Ian was only 6 months old and had just been weaned. His paternal grandmother repeatedly offered to take him to her estate and raise him herself, but I always refused. Eventually, I had no choice but to entrust Ian to her care, so I could go back to my hometown to look after my mother and wait for news of Toby. Not long after, the police called saying they had tracked down the human trafficking ring responsible. The criminals were attempting to flee the country by boat when the authorities closed in. When the police closed in, a firefight broke out, and for reasons unknown, the traffickers' boat exploded. Everyone on board, including the criminals and the many children they had abducted, perished in the blast. The officer told me gently that my nephew was very likely on that boat and had probably died. My mother, who was already so frail, fainted upon hearing the news and passed away 2 days later. After settling things at home, I locked the gate to our yard and headed north alone. When I went back to the Miller estate to get Ian, his grandmother refused to let him go, and Ian did not even recognize me anymore. He would cry whenever I tried to hold him, and since all my other immediate family was gone, he was the only person left in the world who shared my blood. I loved him to the very core of my being and could not bear to see him suffer even the slightest bit of unhappiness. Since he did not want me to hold him, I could not bring myself to force him to leave with me. Later, As he grew up and developed his own personality, he liked me even less. Meanwhile, the police explained that Toby had been taken in by an elderly woman who scavenged for a living in a rural area. A neighbor said the woman had found him by the side of the road years ago, burning with fever and barely breathing. The old woman took him to a local clinic, got him medicine, and nursed him back to health. Because he was not yet school-aged and the woman had limited knowledge of official procedures, she never registered him. He never received a social security number, and for years, Toby spent his days with the woman he called Grandma, collecting recyclables. It was only after the old woman passed away recently that the local authorities brought Toby to the police station, where his true identity was finally discovered. Tears streamed down my face as I choked out the words to the little boy, telling him that he had already been through all the hardship he would ever face. I promised him that from now on, everything would be smooth sailing. My brother-in-law had been an only child and his parents had also passed away, so I was now Toby's only living relative. After completing the paperwork at the police station, I became Toby's legal guardian. I took him home, gave him a warm bath, and dressed him in new, warm clothes. His little hands were red and swollen from a cold, so I gently applied ointment to them. The boy was incredibly brave because even though it was clearly painful, he did not make a sound. I told him that I was his only family now and that I would take care of him and raise him in this home. The little boy looked up at me, his eyes blinking softly. He asked if it was true that I was his mommy's brother, and I smiled as I told him it certainly was. I asked if he noticed how much we looked alike and picked up a small hand mirror to show him our reflections. I pointed out that our eyes were exactly the same. The little boy nodded, his eyes sparkling, so I asked if he wanted to see what his mommy and daddy looked like. He nodded eagerly, so I found the family photo albums and slowly turned the pages for him. I showed him pictures of his mommy when she was little, photos of her with me, and pictures of her in college. The little boy listened intently, and after he finished looking through the album, he suddenly turned and wrapped his arms around me in a tight hug. He asked if I would always be with him, as all he had been through had left him deeply insecure and terrified of being abandoned. I knelt in front of him and told him in a solemn voice that I would be there to watch him grow up. The little boy said we should not be apart even when he was an adult, and I laughed as I agreed that we would stay together. Toby was a remarkably considerate child who was already adept at chores at his young age. If even a little water splashed on the floor, he would immediately grab a cloth to wipe it up. When I cooked, he insisted on helping me wash the vegetables, and he would always rush to wipe the table after dinner. I used to make homemade caramel lollipops for Ian because I was worried about store-bought candy causing cavities, but he was always dismissive of them. Now, when I made them for Toby, the little boy's eyes would crinkle into happy crescents as he ate. He told me the candy I made was so yummy and that it was the best in the whole world. The little boy was a master of compliments, and his smile could cure any sadness I felt. I contacted the local kindergarten and enrolled Toby, who was 5 years old and had never been to school before. On his first day, he was on the verge of tears and looked back at me with every few steps he took. When we got to the main gate, he suddenly spun around and launched himself into my arms like a little cannonball. He asked if I was coming to pick him up today, his lip trembling as he fought back tears and his voice caught at his throat. I held up 3 fingers and swore that I would be there to pick him up this afternoon, joking that a big bad wolf could get me if I failed. He cried even more because he did not want the wolf to get me, but after a long time, I finally managed to coax him into kindergarten. At noon, his teacher sent me a message saying Toby had cried during nap time because he missed his uncle. That afternoon, I was waiting at the kindergarten gate long before school let out. I did not want my little boy to have to wait for me for even a single extra minute. After a week of adjustment, Toby finally got used to kindergarten, and our lives settled into a peaceful rhythm. One day, while we were in the kitchen kneading dough and shaping it into animal-shaped buns, Toby saw a smudge of flour on my nose. He immediately dissolved into a fit of giggles. The doorbell to the front gate rang, so I got up to answer it with Toby bouncing along behind me. I froze when I saw 2 figures, one large and one small, standing at my gate. Olivia spoke first. Her tone as infuriatingly arrogant as ever. She asked if I was done with my little tantrum and told me to pack my things and come back with her. Her proud, self-assured posture made me laugh out loud. I reminded her that we had already been divorced for almost half a year. She shot me a dismissive glance and claimed she knew I was just waiting for her to come and get me. She told me I had gotten what I wanted and could drop the act now. Without waiting for a reply, she pushed past me and walked right in the yard. She looked around with a disdainful expression, remarking that the yard was tiny and barely 500 square feet. She told me that since I liked gardening, we would move into a villa at West Manor when we got back. She said its 2,000 square foot garden should be enough for me to play around with. I yelled her name, my voice sharp as I asked if she was incapable of understanding English. I told her we were divorced and had no relationship, then demanded that she get out of my house. Olivia frowned and was about to say something when Ian, who had been standing beside her, spoke up. He was just a child, but he wore that familiar disapproving expression that I knew all too well. He asked what more I wanted since he and his mom had come all this way to get me personally. Toby, who had been standing quietly beside me, heard someone else call me Dad and immediately tightened his grip on my hand in a surge of anxiety. I patted Toby's head reassuringly, but Ian loudly demanded to know who he was. Toby flinched at Ian's fierce glare, and a pang of protectiveness shot through me. I pulled Toby into my arms and sharply told Ian that he was scaring him. Ian, who was usually so composed, suddenly exploded like a firecracker with his eyes turning red. He lunged forward, trying to pull Toby out of my arms, but I sidestepped his move. He wouldn't give up, calling Toby a brat and screaming that I wasn't allowed to hold him, while Olivia barely managed to restrain him. I looked at them both and told them that if they did not leave right now, I would call the police. Olivia pulled her son toward the gate and turned back to tell me they were staying at the hotel at the end of the block. She said they would only be there for 3 days and that I could find them any time within that window before the offer was off the table. The moment they left, I bolted the gate shut. Toby cautiously asked who they were, and I patiently explained that they were my ex-wife and my son, but that we were divorced and would not be living together anymore. He asked if I was going to go back with that lady, and I told him no. Thinking of that mother and son and their condescending attitude, I wanted to go back in time and slap my former self. It was my own fault for putting her on such a high pedestal and catering to her every whim, which led to her unshakable confidence. She was convinced that I was so hopelessly in love with her that I could never actually leave. She believed that even the divorce was just a tactic or a game of push and pull. To be fair, I could not entirely blame her for being so arrogant when my past behavior had been truly pathetic. I met Olivia in college when she was 2 years ahead of me, and our first encounter happened because she decided to step in and right a wrong. One day, I bought a watermelon from a small market near the dorms, but when I got back and cut it open, it was completely unripe. I took the halved watermelon and went back to confront the clerk, but unfortunately, I had not kept the receipt. Seeing that I had no proof, the clerk flatly denied that I had even bought it there. He would not even touch the watermelon, claiming I must have bought it somewhere else and telling me to get lost. I was so flustered by his unreasonable attitude that I just stood there speechless. Olivia, who had been waiting in line to pay, had apparently seen enough. She pointed to a computer repair shop across the street and said her friend owned it. She claimed his security camera was pointed right at the counter and that she could ask him to check the footage from 10 minutes ago. She continued, saying they could easily see if I had walked out of there carrying a watermelon. The clerk immediately changed his tune and claimed he just couldn't remember every customer. In the end, I got a new watermelon, and I rushed outside to thank Olivia. I asked if the computer shop really belonged to her friend and if she was a computer science major, trying to find out more about her. She told me she was a finance major and admitted the camera across the street was actually a broken dummy. She had just been bluffing, and though her smile was faint and lasted only a second, in that moment, I was completely lost. Later, I saw her again at a university debate tournament, and it was then that I learned she was a campus celebrity. She was admired by countless guys for her stunning looks and academic excellence. I have never been good with words, so I've always been in awe of people who were eloquent and articulate. During that debate, I witnessed her brilliant rhetoric and formidable logic, and my feelings for her began to shift from simple admiration to something more. I learned from classmates that she was in love with someone else, her childhood friend Julian Thorne, who was also a popular and handsome guy on campus. The story was that after their SATs, Olivia had basically copied Julian's list of college applications. By the time they were in college, Julian had already gone through several girlfriends, while Olivia never dated anyone. Everyone knew she was quietly waiting for him, and I was quietly watching her. After graduation, Olivia went to work for her family corporation. During a product launch event, her striking appearance earned her the nickname the Internet's Dream CEO from online communities. The year I graduated, Julian followed his foreign girlfriend abroad for graduate school. I turned down an offer from another prestigious firm and immediately sent my resume to Miller Enterprises. I knew it was impossible, but I was so lovesick that I was content to just be near her silently. I became her assistant, and being able to see her up close every day was enough for me. The day before Julian got married overseas, Olivia flew out to try and stop the wedding. She came back in defeat and drank herself into a stupor that night. I went to her apartment to make her some coffee, and she pulled me in her bed, and I did not push her away. A month later, she was pregnant. When Olivia found out, she told me she was willing to marry me. I knew it was only because Julian's marriage had left her heartbroken and cynical, and that she was simply giving up on the idea of a real marriage. But I could not help the surge of joy I felt. She was my goddess, so there was no way I could refuse her. After we got married, I threw myself into the role and tried with all my might to warm her heart. I failed, burning myself to ashes while she remained unmoved. I ignored Olivia's 3-day ultimatum, even though she expected me to be the one to initiate a reconciliation. She would never be capable of meeting me as an equal, and that was not the kind of partnership I wanted. On the evening of the 3rd day, the mother and son appeared at my gate again. Ian stood there with a grim face and asked what more I wanted since his mom had come all this way to get me. I knelt in front of him and explained calmly that she and I were divorced and could no longer live together. I also reminded him that Julian was the dad he had wanted. Ian pouted and said he didn't like him anymore. So I looked at Olivia and remarked that I thought she and Julian would be married by now. Olivia asked if we could talk, so I nodded and led them inside. This standoff was not a solution, and it was time to clear the air for good. They sat on the sofa, and after I brought them 2 glasses of water, Olivia's voice was uncharacteristically gentle as she looked around. She admitted she was out of line the last time she was here and said the fault was hers. She told me my place was very nice and that I always had a way of making a house feel warm and cozy. She paused, saying that without me, her apartment felt cold and she no longer liked going home. I had no interest in hearing this, so I cut to the chase and asked why they hadn't remarried. She explained that after the divorce, she and Julian did get together, but because they had never been in a real relationship before, they soon discovered they were not a good match. She admitted their lifestyles were completely different. She explained that she keeps a regular schedule while he loves staying up late at bars and sleeping all day. He is so popular that he is surrounded by friends everywhere he goes. If they had the slightest disagreement, a whole group of his friends would come and confront her while taking his side. She felt completely drained every day living with him and said he had no patience for Ian, even yelling at him over little things. They only dated for 3 months before breaking up. Olivia told me softly that she was slow to realize that I was the one she was actually most compatible with. I laughed and told her we were not compatible at all. Our life together used to be smooth only because I was constantly accommodating her every need. She never had to make any effort, so of course it felt easy for her, but I explained that the one who is always giving eventually gets tired. Olivia looked down in silence, just as Toby came out from the kitchen with a homemade caramel lollipop. He held out to Ian and told him he could have it, because it was really yummy. Ian shot up like an enraged bull and slapped the lollipop right out of Toby's hand. Ian screamed that he didn't need Toby trying to suck up to him and that I would make him a whole bunch if he wanted them. I walked over, picked the lollipop off the floor, and handed it back to Toby. I told Toby his brother didn't like it and that he didn't have to share, which made Ian's lip tremble with a wounded look. Ian tried to apologize for knocking the candy away, but I cut him off. I reminded him that he never liked this candy before and had even thrown the ones I made for him in the trash. I told him that since his cousin loves them, I would only be making them for him from now on. Tears rolled down Ian's cheeks as he asked if I didn't want him anymore. Olivia spoke up then, asking why I was making candy for this child and who he was. She admitted she thought he was a neighbor's kid at first, but she noticed he had his own slippers and asked if he was a relative. I told her this was Toby, my sister's son. She asked if he was the child who had been lost, and I confirmed that the police had found him. I explained I was his only living relative and he would be living with me, so Olivia suggested bringing him back to the Miller estate so we could raise both boys together. "I don't want to," Ian shouted, declaring that he did not want Toby in their house. Toby flinched and hid behind me, so I took his small hand in mine to reassure him. I turned back to the mother and son and told them firmly that Toby already had his own home. I told her he did not need someone to grant him a place to live out of charity. Olivia urgently claimed that was not what she meant, but she questioned if I could really stay here with the child forever. I asked her why not, explaining that this was where I grew up and that it was now Toby's home. I pointed out that her son had just said he didn't want Toby in the house, and I added that I didn't want Toby living under someone else's roof and walking on eggshells. Olivia declared that no one would dare make him feel unwelcome. Her tone softened as she told me that she and Ian needed me, but I simply rubbed my temples. I told Olivia that during our marriage, she had treated me with nothing but coldness and had openly cheated on me. She had even let the media believe Julian Thorne was her husband. Now that a few months with him hadn't worked out, she was coming back to me as if she were doing me a favor. I asked her how she could be so shameless after everything that had happened. I told her I didn't want to go back to being a nanny for her and her son. She said they needed me, but I plainly told her that I did not need her. I told her she probably thought being Mr. Miller was some great honor and that I should be grateful she came to get me. She expected me to be so thankful that I would just pack my bags and follow her home. I told her the truth, which was that whenever I thought about the years of abuse I put up with, I wanted to slap my former self awake. I had never spoken to Olivia so harshly, and I imagined it was the first time in her life anyone had been so mercilessly blunt with her. Her face paled as she stared at the floor in silence for a long time. Just as I thought she would get up and storm out in a rage, she spoke in a pleading voice. I had never heard that tone from her before, as she promised she would change. I was taken aback when she admitted I was right and that she had been slow to realize her feelings for me. She confessed she was too arrogant and had taken my love for granted while treating me with disrespect. She insisted it was not because she wanted me to take care of them, but because she realized how desperately she missed me. She told me she thought about me at work, while eating, and while trying to sleep. Her head was so full of me that she couldn't focus, and she asked if that wasn't enough. She admitted she was wrong and had let me down, hoping for a chance to make it right. I shook my head without hesitation and told her I was not going back. Olivia was undeterred, though, and the next day she bought the two-story house directly across the street from mine. After that, Olivia started bringing Ian to stay in the house across the street every winter and summer. I only allowed Ian to come over to my house, as he was still my son after all. I did not hold his past behavior against him too much, because he was just a child then, without a fully formed sense of self. I realized that the way his grandparents described me to him had led him to dislike me so intensely, so I cannot blame him for that. However, because of the hurt he caused, I could never love him again. Now, my feelings for him were strictly a matter of responsibility and care. I told him directly that if he needed me, I would provide the care and companionship he required, but nothing more. I admitted that I might never be able to love him the way other fathers love their children. Ian had smiled with a knowing sadness and said he knew he had wasted all the love I gave him before. He admitted he didn't know how to appreciate it and that everything now was just what he deserved. He said he was happy enough as long as I didn't push him away. On his 6th birthday, I bought him a cake and gave him a hug, and he cried as he said it was nice that his dad was finally hugging him. Compared to Ian, I was far less forgiving with Olivia and remained firm in my refusal to let her set foot in my house. Every time Ian was overplaying or eating a meal, she would wait quietly outside. When Ian was ready to leave, she would take his hand and they would walk away together in silence. Over time, my resentment towards her slowly faded, and I eventually spoke with her calmly. I told her that my feelings for her were now the same as those for strangers. I had thought it through and realized I couldn't blame her for everything since I was the one who threw myself at her like a moth to a flame. I told her she had every right not to respond to my feelings back then, but I needed her to understand that I did not love her anymore. I told her that her waiting was pointless and she should just give up. Olivia managed a relaxed smile and said she could clearly see that I no longer loved her. She told me that she was the one who loved me now and that she couldn't just turn her feelings on. She said that just being able to see me was enough, and that waiting for me had become a part of her life. She no longer expected me to come back, and told me she would keep waiting while I lived my life. Olivia was true to her word, waiting quietly and never disturbing me. Whenever she brought Ian over, she would greet me with a simple, friendly hello like any other. This continued until the year Toby turned 8, which was the same year I fell in love. After that, Ian started coming for school breaks by himself. His mother no longer came with him, and Ian and I were much more comfortable with each other by then. He told me with a smile that his mom didn't dare to come anymore. He said she couldn't stand to see me with another woman and was afraid she might do something impulsive to hurt her, so she stayed away to avoid loneliness. Ultimately, this story is a powerful reminder that self-worth is found in the courage to walk away from a life where you are merely an option and into a future where you are a priority. It depicts a man's journey from being an invisible husband to finding true fulfillment by raising a rediscovered nephew and building a life defined by peace rather than performance. It teaches us that the most profound healing doesn't come from a grand reconciliation, but from outgrowing it so completely that the apologies of those who hurt you no longer hold any power over your heart.